20 days has been paid the same wages that one would be paid for working 55 years. But this force of 1,000 has done in 20 days what a single man could not have accomplished, though he had labored for a million centuries. Is the exchange an equitable one? Once more, no. When you have paid all the individual forces, the collective force still remains to be paid. Consequently, there remains always a right of collective property which you have not acquired, and which you enjoy unjustly. Admit that 20 days' wages suffice to feed, lodge, and clothe this multitude for 20 days, thrown out of employment at the end of that time, what will become of them, if, as fast as they create, they abandon their creations to the proprietors who will soon discharge them? While the proprietor, firm in his position thanks to the aid of all the laborers, dwells in security, and fears no lack of labor or bread, the laborer's only dependence is upon the benevolence of this same proprietor, to whom he has sold and surrendered his liberty. If, then, the proprietor, shielding himself behind his comfort and his rights, refuses to employ the laborer, how can the laborer live? He has plowed an excellent field, and cannot sow it. He has built an elegant and commodious house, and cannot live in it. He has produced all, and can enjoy nothing. Labor leads us to equality. Every step that we take brings us nearer to it. And if laborers had equal strength, diligence, and industry, clearly their fortunes would be equal also. Indeed, if, as is pretended, and as we have admitted, the laborer is proprietor of the value which he creates, it follows, 1. That the labor acquires at the expense of the idle proprietor. 2. That all production being necessarily collective, the laborer is entitled to a share of the products and profits commensurate with his labor. 3. That all accumulated capital being social property, no one can be its exclusive proprietor. These inferences are unavoidable. These alone would suffice to revolutionize our whole economical system, and change our institutions and our laws. Why do the very persons, who laid down this principle, now refuse to be guided by it? Why do the Sayes, the Kants, the Hanequins, and others, after having said that property is born of labor, seek to fix it by occupation and prescription? But let us leave these sophists to their contradictions and blindness. The good sense of the people will do justice to their equivocations. Let us make haste to enlighten it, and show it the true path. Equality approaches. Already between it and us but a short distance intervenes. Tomorrow even this distance will have been traversed. 6. That in society all wages are equal. When the Saint-Simonians, the Fourierists, and, in general, all who in our day are connected with social economy and reform, inscribe upon their banner, to each according to his capacity, to each capacity according to its results Saint Simon, to each according to his capital, his labor, and his skill Fourier, they mean, although they do not say so in so many words, that the products of nature procured by labor and industry are a reward, a palm, a crown offered to all kinds of preeminence and superiority. They regard the land as an immense arena in which prizes are contended for, no longer, it is true, with lances and swords, by force and by treachery, but by acquired wealth, by knowledge, talent, and by virtue itself. In a word, they mean, and everybody agrees with them, that the greatest capacity is entitled to the greatest reward. And, to use the mercantile phraseology, which has, at least, the merit of being straightforward, the salaries must be governed by capacity and its results. The disciples of these two self-styled reformers cannot deny that such is their thought. For, in doing so, they would contradict their official interpretations, and would destroy the unity of their systems. Furthermore, such a denial on their part is not to be feared. The two sects glory in laying down as a principle inequality of conditions, reasoning from nature, who, they say, intended the inequality of capacities. They boast only of one thing, namely, that their political system is so perfect, that the social inequalities always correspond with the natural inequalities. They no more trouble themselves to inquire whether inequality of conditions, I mean of salaries, is possible, than they do to fix a measure of capacity. To each according to his capacity, to each capacity according to its results. To each according to his capital, his labor, and his skill. Since the death of Saint Simon and Fourier, not one among their numerous disciples has attempted to give to the public a scientific demonstration of this grand maxim. And I would wager 100 to 1 that no Fourierist even suspects that this biform aphorism is susceptible of two interpretations. To each according to his capacity, to each capacity according to its results. To each according to his capital, his labor, and his skill. This proposition, taken, as they say, in sensu obvio, in the sense usually attributed to it, is false, absurd, unjust, contradictory, hostile to liberty, friendly to tyranny, antisocial, and was unluckily framed under the express influence of the property idea. And, first, capital must be crossed off the list of elements which are entitled to a reward. The Fourierists, as far as I have been able to learn from a few of their pamphlets, deny the right of occupancy, and recognize no basis of property save labor. Starting with the like premise, they would have seen, had they reasoned upon the matter, that capital is a source of production to its proprietor only by virtue of the right of occupancy, and that this production is therefore illegitimate. Indeed, if labor is the sole basis of property, I cease to be proprietor of my field as soon as I receive rent for it from another. This we have shown beyond all cavil. It is the same with all capital. So that to put capital in an enterprise, is, by the law's decision, to exchange it for an equivalent sum in products. I will not enter again upon this now useless discussion, since I propose, in the following chapter, to exhaust the subject of production by capital. Thus, capital can be exchanged, but cannot be a source of income. Labor and skill remain. Or, as Saint Simon puts it, results and capacities. I will examine them successively. Should wages be governed by labor? In other words, is it just that he who does the most should get the most? I beg the reader to pay the closest attention to this point. To solve the problem with one stroke, we have only to ask ourselves the following question: is labor a condition or a struggle? The reply seems plain. God said to man, "In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread," that is, thou shalt produce thy own bread, with more or less ease, according to thy skill in directing and combining thy efforts. Thou shalt labor. God did not say, "Thou shalt quarrel with thy neighbor for thy bread," but, "Thou shalt labor by the side of thy neighbor, and ye shall dwell together in harmony." Let us develop the meaning of this law, the extreme simplicity of which renders it liable to misconstruction. In labor, two things must be noticed and distinguished: association and available material. In so far as laborers are associated, they are equal. And it involves a contradiction to say that one should be paid more than another. For, as the product of one laborer can be paid for only in the product of another laborer, if the two products are unequal, the remainder or the difference between the greater and the smaller will not be acquired by society. And, therefore, not being exchanged, will not affect the equality of wages. There will result, it is true, in favor of the stronger labor a natural inequality, but not a social inequality. No one having suffered by his strength and productive energy. In a word, society exchanges only equal products that